You wouldn't lock your car doors and leave your windows rolled down. Sounds silly. But that's what a lot of professionals are doing with their insurance. They think general liability covers everything, but it doesn't. General liability is for physical accidents like someone slipping in your office. In this video, you'll learn the difference between general liability and professional liability insurance. In a nutshell, general liability covers physical damage, professional liability covers mental mistakes. Think slip and fall versus giving bad advice. Most professionals assume general liability covers everything, and it doesn't. If you give advice, you're at risk. That includes insurance agents, accountants, realtors, architects, and even contractors who might misread a set of plans. How to compare professional liability insurance quotes in New York, and I'll break down the main terms, limits, and coverages you'll see in these quotes so you'll actually understand what you're buying without needing a law degree. Every so often, there's a story of people who are following GPS and make a wrong turn into a lake or onto a road. My first thought is, how stupid can people be? We still have eyes. You should have seen the lake. But we all follow our GPS turn by turn, only to end up totally lost. Or it seems like we're driving in circles. You did exactly what you're told, you had advice, but somehow things still went off course, and you know your spouse in the passenger seat is judging you. That's what it's like when a client follows your advice. Whether you're an architect, a contractor, an accountant, or a consultant, and the outcome doesn't go their way, even if you weren't exactly wrong, you're the one they're going to point the finger at. And yes, they can sue. Most professionals assume they're protected by general liability insurance. General liability is like a fire extinguisher, perfect for putting out small fires, but useless for a flood. If someone slips, trips, or there's property damage, it's exactly what you need. That is what general liability insurance is for. But if a client says your advice caused financial harm, that's a professional liability claim. General liability, professional liability are not the same thing, as you would have gathered from above, and they don't cover the same risk. On one side, general liability, this is what covers your physical stuff. Think a client trips over a cord in your office, a ladder tips over and breaks a window, or you damage someone's property working on site. That's general liability if something tangible goes wrong. On the other side, professional liability. It's also called E&O, short for errors. This is what covers mental mistakes, like giving wrong advice, missing a key detail in a report, misinterpreting a regulation, completing a construction project that doesn't pass code, or just being accused of not doing your job the right way. Now, here's the one thing most business owners get wrong. They think general liability covers everything, including mental mistakes. It doesn't. General liability doesn't help if your client sues you because your advice cost them money, even if they just think you made a mistake. That's professional liability. So here's your shortcut to remember it. Professional liability equals mental damage or perceived mistakes. And if you're in a business that gives advice, makes recommendations, or interprets plans, you're going to need both. Who needs professional liability? Spoiler, it's more than you think. Only 32% of small businesses carry this coverage. Does every business need professional liability insurance? No. Let's talk about who actually needs it. When most people think of professional liability, they're thinking of doctors, lawyers, and accountants. This is only a small portion of reality. If your work includes giving advice, making recommendations, or creating plans others rely on, you need professional liability insurance. Let's break it down. Accountants, if a tax filing gets flagged or your advice leads to penalties, that's professional liability. Architects, if a client claims your design errors cause a costly delay, that's a professional liability. Realtors, mistake square footage or fail to disclose something and get sued, yep, that's professional liability. Consultants and marketing agencies, if a strategy doesn't deliver the expected results, say you put the wrong web address on an ad, or worse, cause a loss, you're on the hook. Therapists, emotional harm claims, covered under professional liability. And here's the one most people don't expect. Contractors? Aren't they all about physical work? 4 contractors will face a professional liability claim in their career. That's like a 50 batting average, above the Mendoza line. You might be saying to yourself, shut the front door. How? But here's the twist. Many contractors also give advice. They interpret plans, they give recommendations. If a project goes wrong, someone thinks it was your input that caused the problem, you're liable. So, if you're in any of these fields or anything similar and your clients rely on your brains as much as your hands, you need this protection. Number 3, what it covers and doesn't cover. Okay, so you're starting to see why professional liability is important. But once you start looking at the quotes or talking to agents, the terms can get confusing real quick. Let's break it down in plain English. Professional liability covers negligence, real or alleged. Even if you did nothing wrong, if a client thinks you gave them bad advice or missed a detail, they can file a claim. Your policy covers the cost to defend you, and if need, pay out damages legal speak for you lost and you have to pay money. Errors and omissions. This is a big one. It protects you if you leave something out of a report, make an error in your plans, or forget to mention something to a client who later says it was important. Legal defense. Even if the claim is totally bogus, lawyers still cost money. Professional liability coverage pays for your legal team, and trust me, that adds up fast. What professional liability doesn't cover? Bodily injury or property damage. That's the general liability insurance territory. Remember the fire extinguisher analogy? Wrong tool. Intentional wrongdoing or fraud. If you stop paying for coverage, you're usually no longer protected, even for things that happened while you were insured. That's why understanding the difference between claims made and occurrence-based policy is so important. Insurance policy is written in 2 different ways: claims made and occurrence. Most professional liability policies are claims made, and here's what that means. Your coverage only works if the policy is active both at the time the claim was filed and when a mistake happened. Here's an example. You gave advice to a client back in 2022. They're fine with it until 2024 when something goes wrong and decide to sue. Is your professional liability policy still active in 2024? And had it been enforced since before the mistake in 2022? You're covered. But let your policy lapse even just for a few days. You're on your own. No coverage. That's the catch with claims-made policies. The protection ends when the policy ends, not just when the work ends. Compare that to occurrence policies. More common with general liability, auto and homeowners insurance. They work differently. It protects you for nearly forever if it happened during the time the policy was active, even if the claim shows up years later and you no longer have that insurance. Example, you had a general liability policy in 2020. Someone trips and falls in your office in 2020. They don't until 2024. If there's an occurrence policy, you're covered even though you canceled your policy years ago. Why? Because you had coverage when the trip and fall occurred. That's the key difference. Claims made policy, you must keep the policy active both when the claim occurred and when the claim is filed. Occurrences, you're protected for what happened during the coverage period, even after coverage ends. Let's talk about retroactive dates. This is the start line for your protection and professional liability. If a claim involves something that happened before your retro date, even if your policy is active, you're not covered. It's super important to make sure your retroactive date goes back as far as possible, ideally to when you first started your professional work. For example, I started Joyce Insurance on August 24th, 1996. That's my retro date. That's the date my coverage starts. My professional liability coverage has been continuous since that day. So if someone came to me today and said, hey, you made a mistake way back on my policy in 2000, my insurance will still defend me and pay the claim if I'm found liable, because that 2000 incident falls after my retro date and I've had no gaps in coverage. Even though I switched insurance carriers, my coverage is continuous. My new carrier will provide coverage back to August 1996. But here's the catch. If my policy had canceled in July 2010 and I started a new policy just 2 days later, that little tiny gap would reset my retroactive date to July 2010. Now that same 2000 claim wouldn't be covered because it happened before my new retro date of July 2010. So what's the key takeaway? Your policy must be continuous. Even a one-day lapse resets that retroactive date and can leave you totally exposed. Does it actually cover when things go wrong? Let's break it down, plain and simple, with real examples. Legal defense costs pays for your attorney's fees, court costs, expert witnesses, and other legal expenses, even if the claim is completely bogus. Example, a client blames you for bad advice that you did everything right. Even if you win, you still need to pay your lawyer, any expert witnesses, court costs. Professional liability pays for that. They also pay for damage and settlements. If you lose, example, you're found liable for a mistake that cost your client money. Negligence covers unintentional mistakes errors that cause financial harm to a client. Example, a real estate agent forgets to mention a roof leak. The buyer sues after moving in. If someone claims your advice was misleading, professional liability covers you. Example, a financial advisor recommends an investment that wasn't a good fit. Their client claims they weren't fully informed. Breach of contract. This is limited, depends on the policy. Some policies include coverage for unintentional breaches of a written or verbal agreement related to your service. Example, you missed a project deadline that's in a contract and it caused your client financial loss. This might be covered depending on your policy. Personal injury in a professional setting. This includes things like libel or slander, or violating someone's privacy as part of your work. Example, you write a blog post that accidentally defames a competitor. They sue you. Your professional liability will step in to cover you. Claims from past work. That's that retroactive date we spoke. If a claim comes to you for work you did before your current policy started, you're still covered. Example, you gave advice in 2019, but a client files a claim today. If your policy has a retroactive date of 2018, you're covered. There's also things which are not typically covered. Intentional harm or fraud by you. But you would be covered if your employee committed the same intentional fraud. As long as you didn't do it, it should be covered. Physical injury or property damage. We discussed that's general liability. Employees issue. You didn't get benefits you told your employees they had. That's employment practices liability. Cyber attacks or data loss. That's covered by cyber liability insurance, naturally. What else is not covered? Work that you weren't qualified for or licensed to perform. You're an accountant, but you sold real estate. Not a licensed real estate agent, you're an accountant. Your hours of admission is not going to cover that real estate transaction. Take your next step with confidence. So now you know what professional liability insurance is, who needs it, and what it really covers. What's your next step? The next step? Let's make sure you're actually protected. At Joyce Insurance, we'll explain everything in plain English. No jargon, no pressure, just solid advice. We'll help you compare quotes from top carriers, spot the gaps in coverage, lock in a retroactive date, protect your past work. Because it's not just about having a policy, it's about having the right policy, one that actually works when you need it most. Click above to schedule a quick, no-pressure call with our team. Or head to our website below to request a quote and take the first steps towards peace of mind. Joyce Insurance, old school service, modern convenience, and probably a better price than you're expecting.